Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. It's wonderful that you can join us again. We've got some fantastic content to share with you today. This is our third deep dive into road trips. In 2018 at Esto, we worked with our wonderful friends at Longwoods on a analysis of road trip behavior, and we presented the results of that. We updated that in 2020 with some of the latest insights, including the impact of the pandemic. And now we're back for a third time, a deep dive into US travelers and their road trip behavior. We've got three wonderful speakers with you today. My name's Chris Adams. I look after research and insights at Miles Partnership. Delighted to be joined by an old, very familiar friend, Amir Elon, President and CEO of Longwoods International. And Amir, a little bit under the weather today, but he's gainfully got out of bed and he's with you today. So I'll come to Amir in a moment. We've got Kelly, who's head of travel marketing at Travel Michigan, joins us actually from, I think it's the Upper Peninsula, isn't it, Kelly?
Yes, Mackinac Island.
Thank you so much for joining us. And Kelly's going to be joining us at the end, talking about specifically what the wonderful state of Michigan and pure Michigan are doing in terms of road trip marketing and some of the both immediate marketing and some of the longer term investments they're making around EV. And then sandwiched between those two great speakers is another wonderful speaker. So Monica is Director of PR and Communications at the RV Industry Association, Go RVing. And Monica is joining us today to have an interview to talk about the booming recreational vehicle and motorhome market and some of the latest trends. And where are you joining us today from, Monica?
I'm in Northern Virginia, just outside DC.
Thank you. And of course, Go RVing and the RV Industry Association represents all the manufacturers of RVs, but they're very active in terms of, you've probably seen some of their advertising in terms of promoting and highlighting the opportunity of going RVing. And that's exactly what Americans have been doing in recent years. So some wonderful stats to share today. So you can see the agenda. So we're going to have a deep dive into the latest Longwoods research on US road trip behavior. I think Amir's going to start off first, though, with some of the latest stats on research that we've sponsored around the impact of gas prices, concerns, lingering concerns around the pandemic, etc., and some of the short-term challenges, as well as the overall sort of trends around road trip behavior. I'm going to interview Monica around some of the latest stats that the RV Industry Association is able to share, and we'll have some research links to share with you after the presentation today, looking at the demographics of RV owners and renters. And then we'll be joined by Kelly talking about specifically what Michigan's doing. And then hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A. At the end. So thank you again, everybody. Let's pass it over without further ado to Amir. Just a reminder, all the presentation slides and all the research slides, and there's a more expensive research deck available in addition to the webinar recording, are all going to be available on this landing page right here. And we have a 4-page summary of some of the latest stats. We'll be updating and sharing that in the next week or so onto that page that distills those down. So over to you, Amir. Let's please share what's happening in terms of the road trip market, starting with those immediate impacts of gas prices, inflation, and other concerns.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chris. So it's a pleasure to be back here and sharing some of the latest insights with you. If you're not familiar with Longwoods, we've been around just a little while, so celebrating our 44th anniversary here shortly. And we've been doing travel research for many, many years, but Travel USA, where the majority of this research I'm going to share with you comes from, we've been doing this since 1990. So have a long track record. So when Chris came to us to look at these items, we had a lot of data go upon road trips over the years. But as Chris alluded to, first I'm going to start off with, you know what, we're going to say it's going to be the summer of the Great American Road Trip in 2022 here there. But how do we know? Well, the indicators are there through travel sentiment. Thanks to our partners at Miles, we've been able to continue fielding our American Traveler Sentiment Study since the very beginning of the pandemic. And while we continue to track some of the after effects or impacts of the pandemic as it has subsided in terms of its impact on the travel industry, we've been reaching into other areas that have been coming up in recent years or recent months. And of course, we continue to talk about travel behavior and expected travel behavior. And so how do we know it's the year of the road trip? Well, at the beginning of the year, we asked American travelers, what's the first trip you're going to take this year? And guess what? They all said, we're going to go see friends and relatives, and primarily by car. And then they said they were going to go take a vacation or getaway. And they said it's going to be by car. So we have that foundation. And folks, I'm going to move very, very quickly here. As Chris alluded to, we've got all this data and then some to share with you on the links that he'll put up at the end. Talking about the next activities that folks are going to do on their next leisure trip. We asked this question this spring. As you can see, visiting friends and relatives was number one, but then number two was road trip. And when we compare with it year over year, now remember 21, the great majority of road trip of the travel that happened was road trip. But looking ahead at 22, even a greater intent, 42% are planning to take a road trip on their very next trip, not just a trip at all. Now, we asked folks about road trips for the entire year. And we said, hey, raise your hands. Tell us if you got a road trip planned over the next 12 months. 95%, so almost all American travelers have a road trip planned in 2022 or into early 23. So yeah, it's going to be the year of the road trip. But we've got inflation and we got the gas prices issue here with record gas prices right now. And as you can see, that we're talking about 59% of American travelers that are telling us that gas prices will impact or greatly impact their decision to travel in the next 6 months. Now, we've been tracking this since early March, since the end of February. And as you can see, it's kind of went up from 29% up to 38%, and then it kind of plateaued for a while there. And then this last wave that just released last week showed that we went down 5 points to 32%. Now, let's not all celebrate and pop champagne corks yet, because one data point does not a trend make, but this could be a good indicator that American travelers are getting used to the higher gas prices at this point. And we're going to follow that closely and keep reporting on that for you. But you know, it is having an impact. As I showed you, 59% said it's going to likely impact their how they travel in the next 6 months. Here's how it's going to impact them. And these are patterns that are almost exactly similar to what we saw during the last major couple of gas price spikes, like during the Great Recession and before that. So you got 39% that are choosing destinations closer to home. 1/3 are reducing the number of trips that they're taking. 1/3 are reducing the amount of spend on retail purchases and on recreation and entertainment. And then there's those folks that are reducing their spend on food and beverage and on lodging. And then there are those that are choosing to drive instead of fly, because with the airfares going up exponentially as well, it might be cheaper for them to take their whole family on that road trip to drive down to Florida from, say, Ohio, where I'm sitting today, than fly the family of four down to Florida. Take that trip. The good news here is, look at this. Only 6% of American travelers are canceling trips. It's a very low number. At any given time, there's already 4 to 5% of travelers that are canceling their trips for whatever reason. So it's only slightly elevated, and that should be a silver lining for us. It's not about Americans not traveling this summer. It's about how they're going to reallocate their spend, as this is showing you, to make their travel budget.
Just a quick note, Amir, we've summarized the wonderful research that Longwoods has been undertaking with our support in this blog, and we looked at specific recommendations, both short-term recommendations in terms of responding to these challenges and some of the longer-term implications. So please check that out, and I'll come back and join you at the end just with some other quick observations. But back to you, Amir.
Thanks, Chris. All right, so let's jump in. So, we talked about the sentiment towards road trips, and as you can see, it is going to be the year of road trips. But let's talk about those road trips and what they mean. And, road trip travel has changed a little bit from when we gave you the last update in 2020. 2021 painted a very interesting picture of road trippers. And we pulled some of the data here. Again, there's going to be a lot more available at the link online. I'm not going to have time to show you all the psychographic, demographic information that I know many of you marketers are going to want to dig into, but we picked out a few nuggets here that we think are really, really important. And this comes right out of Longwoods Travel USA, the largest and longest ongoing study of American traveling households. We're in the field year round. And every year we're documenting between 250,000 to 300,000 trips taken by American travelers. So quite a robust sample to which to pull from. Let's go take a look. So when we looked at the travel year 2021 and compared road trip travelers versus your general leisure travelers, let's take a look at what we saw. Well, the big winners in terms of road trips were the Pacific regions across the US, the mountain regions, the East, South, Central. Those all saw significantly higher road trip travel than your regular overall leisure travel there. The great open, wide open spaces, great outdoors of America. No surprise right there that we saw this, as we were still very much in a pandemic environment. Let's talk about these road trippers a little bit. As you can see, when you look at the repeat visitation incidents in there, it's slightly below, it's a few points below those general leisure travelers, which means that these road trippers have a higher likelihood to be lured away by someplace new. So if you're a destination within a regional drive market, especially this year, given the gas prices, you're able to tap into slightly new audiences, go for it. They're going to be looking for something fresh to do. Let's look at how they plan their trip. Well, they're looking at hotels and resorts, auto clubs, much greater utilization of auto clubs than your regular leisure travelers. So yeah, destination websites, almost 2-to-1 right there, as you can see. Using convention visitor bureaus, government tourism offices, much greater utilization than your average leisure traveler. Let's look at their planning here. So these road trips, they're doing their homework, folks. They're taking their time, 3 to 5 months, and the 6 to 12 months, much greater planning windows than those doing the short travel planning for leisure travel. Now, booking, interesting to see here. The big standout here over your typical leisure traveler is the use of the auto club. Here. So again, for those of you who had relationships in the past with AAA or were thinking about pulling away from that, don't pull away from your auto club marketing programs or partnerships just yet. And we're going to come back to that here in a little bit. There, in terms of accommodation type, well, these road trippers have a much greater propensity to stay at hotels and motels and paid accommodations in general there. And at the bottom end of the spectrum, look at the bottom of the screen there, they're much less likely to stay with friends and relatives. Now, it doesn't mean they don't want to do road trips with their friends and relatives, but they don't want to stay. They've been staying at home the last couple of years, folks. Last thing they want to do is stay in somebody's guest room. And in terms of the activities they're engaging in, as you can see, compared to your average leisure traveler, they're doing much more entertainment activity, outdoor activity, heritage cultural activity, significantly more there, and a slightly greater propensity to mix business and leisure as well than your average leisure traveler. And some of those activities, we don't have time to show you all of them, but as you can see, the big winners here: sightseeing, shopping, historical sites, museums, and national state parks. A lot of the great outdoors, you get it, and even the wineries, breweries, and distillery tours. I know, no jokes about road trippers drinking and driving. That's not going to happen there, but they want to take those tours. And then activities of special interest, again, a lot of the heritage, cultural activities really kind of leading the way there. In terms of dining activities, they're much greater propensity also to explore and check out the local unique foods that your destination has to offer. And again, slightly elevated above all the regular types of dining scenes that you might experience on leisure travel. So they're big time eating out. In terms of retail, yeah, they're souvenir shopping much more than your average leisure travel. They're looking for those unique gifts, even boutique shopping, as you can see there. They're really looking for those unique gifts on Main Street and other places in your destination that they couldn't get back home. So there's another type of road tripper we want to talk to you about real quickly here. And these are road trippers that are touching 5 states or more. There's the shorter road trips that are taking 4 states or less, and then the ones that go 5 states or more. Those are the ones, that's really the Griswolds, right? That's Clark Griswold and family hopping in the family trucks or heading out west or wherever they're going and exploring this great country. This is a unique audience and a great opportunity for multiple states and destinations to collaborate with to attract, because let's look at some key differences here real quickly. First of all, how did they behave last year? Well, in 2021, as you can see, the South Atlantic actually kind of led the way here. But again, we also saw the growth in the great outdoors and out west as we expected to see, but also even New England and the East North Central saw some good growth over compared to your regular road tripper. Now we're comparing these to road trippers, not a long road tripper versus an average road tripper. Let's see what we can learn right here. Well, the travel party composition is a little different too. It tends to be more people. And as we know, more people means spending more money. And in a time when, the recessions, or not recession, the inflation is having an impact on buying patterns, this is a great opportunity to get a larger party size to make up for some of that reallocated spend. So almost one full person larger in party size that we're seeing compared to regular road trippers. And of course, and of course that's made up with, it tends to be a little more adults and maybe a little more family traveler as well, but primarily the adults bringing on a spouse or partner, etc. Let's move on here. In terms of trip planning information, again, even greater propensity than their average road trippers to look at visit hotel sites, destination websites, especially online travel agencies, and visitors bureau, government tourism offices, etc. Really high utilization of your resources there for you destination marketers. In terms of trip planning information, where are they getting it from? Short-term rental websites also, travel company websites, and office travel guides of state, cities, regions, etc. Again, higher propensity than your average road tripper. In terms of length of trip planning, again, they're planning even longer because then this is a 5-state plus trip. This is a big one. So they're doing a lot more homework here. But that's a good thing. Road trippers in general, they're doing more homework than your average leisure traveler. The more homework they're doing, the more opportunity they have to see your message for you to lure them in. So content is king here, people. Content is king. And so you've got that great opportunity there. Activity groupings. Well, I think you saw entertainment number 1, outdoor number 2. Here it's kind of flipped for the longer road trippers. You've got outdoor activities number 1, entertainment number 2. But look at that, they're engaging significantly more in these top 3 categories than your normal than your normal road trippers who are already doing a high engagement in outdoor cultural entertainment activities. Some of those experiences, again, the sightseeing, no surprise there, the shopping, the landmarks and historic sites, but look at that, across the board, all these key cultural and outdoor heritage type of activities, doing much more getting involved out there with nature. And again, part of that is a result of the pandemic, and that's going to continue. Last segment I'm going to spend time on as we segue to one of our colleagues here is when we called out the segment on those taking RV trips. So let's look at the RV road trip versus the general road trip, which might be in your car or wherever. So again, RVing, Pacific coast of the US, South Atlantic region of the US, mountain region. Again, similar patterns that we've seen here before. But look at this. We see a much higher propensity than your average road tripper for repeat visitation. So they have a loyalty to those destinations and those regions that whatever attracted them, their experience was good enough that they tend to come back and want to see more. So there's an opportunity. If you know who's already been coming, you can remarket to these folks quite nicely. Let's look at their travel party composition as well. Again, you're seeing a little larger, but they tend to bring more children. With them. So definitely a little more family-friendly environment here. And length of trip planning, of course, these folks are doing some of the most trip planning we've seen amongst all the categories of road trippers in there, and they are doing their homework. And like I said, that's an opportunity for you from the marketing perspective. And look at how they're booking. Look at the use of the auto club, 2-to-1 versus your normal road tripper. And that was already higher than your regular leisure traveler, right? Also, in terms of booking with airlines, commercial carriers, a lot of these folks also are flying to a destination area or flying to a starting point for the road trip and renting RVs and going along the way. So that's really continued to grow in popularity and so forth. Using travel agents, these folks have specialized needs. They're going to use travel counselors. Travel counselors are becoming much more important to them from there. But look at also this utilization of visitors bureaus, the DMOs, and so forth. There. In terms of the activities, again, outdoor leads the way, but look at this growth in sporting activities compared to your average road tripper, and business activities. So that working remote factor that you're seeing, really almost a doubling there of those for your typical road trippers in there. And then you've got your dining activities. So remember, we saw looking to explore local dining. Well, here you got the ones that are because they're RVing, they're looking more to delivery services, how they can stock up on their groceries and their supplies and so forth. But when they do go out, they do like to have a good meal. You expect to go picnicking, but look at the gastropubs. Look how those about 1/3 greater utilization of dining categories around gastropubs than your average road trippers in there. So they do like a nice meal out sometimes too in there. And then of course, retail, you got to kind of flip that upside down as well. It's more about, again, resupplying. So they're the ones more likely to shop at the big box store retailers and your local convenience and grocery stores than besides that, but they do like their antiquing as well. So, all right, and the last thing I'm going to show you here is I am going to show you just a little bit gender and age here. I'm going to bust a little bubble because sometimes when people bring up the topic of RVers, they get this image of retired couples going and hitting the road. Well, let me show you. There's actually a younger demographic, actually younger folks that are RVing here. The average age of your RV road tripper is 36.5 versus 42.5, and as you can see, the largest gains of groups there are in the younger generations. As we're looking at the millennials and Gen Zs and even some Gen Xers right there. Now, last thing I'm going to leave you with is, so we'll go back to sentiment. We asked these travelers about their road trips for this coming year. What are the factors that are most important for them in deciding where to visit? And as you can see, yeah, they'd like to visit family and friends along the way, but they don't want to stay with them. They want to be near water, the oceans, the rivers, the lakes, and so forth. They're looking for local, unique, cultural attractions, iconic places, all kinds of great natural regions, but they also want city experiences, 1 out of 4 right there. They're looking back for special events again and so forth. And let's not forget that 1 out of 5 there, near the bottom, 21% say that health and safety concerns related to COVID-19. Let's not forget the pandemic's not over from that perspective. Well, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Chris, back over to you, my friend.
Thanks very much, Amir. A lot of information there. Just a reminder, both the slides that Amir has shared, plus the fuller research slide deck is going to be available to share. We're going to send out an email 24 hours after the webinar today, plus I've shared in the chat the link. So just a couple of observations, and then I'll welcome back in Monica. So obviously we've emphasized the importance of marketing and messaging needed to be adjusted around the impacts of gas prices, inflation concerns, concepts like value, and pivoting to perhaps shorter drive markets are going to be key. But there's opportunities, as Amir's already shared, to highlight new attractions, new activities, perhaps attract a larger party size so you can keep spend up. There's some sort of non-typical marketing partners like hotels, motels, short-term rentals, the AAA that are important in this market. We want to drive, of course, dispersal and length of stay. And I know Kelly's going to talk about some of this with regards to what's happening in Michigan. And some of the things we've seen successful there include touring routes, passport programs. Nebraska, for example, has got a wonderful passport program which highlights activities, attractions, shopping, retail, dining experiences, including in out-of-the-way locations, and of course, value. Doesn't have to be price based. It can be other incentives around value. Going to be particularly important in the coming summer and perhaps well beyond. And then short-term rentals offer a growing opportunity, particularly in rural, small down destinations, which don't typically have a lot of commercial accommodation. And obviously there's some challenges to the whole short-term rental market, but they can be carefully managed and create those opportunities. And then just finally, RVs. So booming market, new, younger, thing, market in terms of the demographics, etc. Let's just run a quick poll on this. And Monica, I think you're going to be interested in this. So we're just going to pull up a poll here and ask everybody who's online today, what are you doing in the road trip space generally? And in the RV market specifically. So you've got three choices there. So do you have a road trip marketing program? Do you basically market to road trips, and as part of that, you are doing some specific marketing at RV and motorhome users? Or at the moment you don't have any road trip marketing, either generally or to RV motorhome users? So if you just pick one of those choices, and we'll just give you another few seconds and then we'll have a look at the results. So let's pull up the results. Okay, so you can see there that just around just over half of people are marketing road trip travelers generally. Just 10%, Monica, have marketing specifically to RV and motorhome users as part of their road trip marketing. So obviously an opportunity to perhaps grow that. About a quarter aren't doing any marketing at the moment to road trip space. Okay, so thanks again, Monica, for joining us. Do you want to just briefly reintroduce the RV Industry Association and then perhaps share with us a couple of key stats that you've been tracking that really speak to the fact that the RV market is booming?
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to join you guys today. So Monica Geraci, and I run PR for the RV Industry Association. We represent the manufacturers and suppliers who build RVs. And one of our programs is Go RVing, which is our consumer facing advertising arm that we do, that we run in conjunction with the Dealers Association. So the goal of Go RVing is to expose more people to the RV lifestyle and the many different types of RVs that are available. So I'm sure there's probably not anyone here on this webinar that hasn't heard of RVing over the past 2 years. You had to have been living under a rock. We have seen incredible growth in RVing. Started a couple years ago with the freedom and control to still be able to travel, but also control your environment that was so important during the pandemic. But what we've actually seen over the past 2 years now is that people are buying RVs for the same reason they've always bought RVs. It's the love of road trips and traveling in comfort, and that exploring the great outdoors, which was a lot of what Amir was just talking about in their research. So a couple high-level stats. The number of RV owning households is 11.2 million. And over the past 10 years, that's gone up 26%. And I have to put a little caveat that we actually did that right before the pandemic. So that has increased since then as well. To meet that demand that's been happening over the past couple years, the RV industry actually built over 600,000 RVs in 2021. And some context there, the previous high was 504,000 in 2017. So a lot more RVs have been built in the past year to meet this demand. So that's some of the high level stats.
Okay, thanks, Monica. And we were seeing in the research that Amir was sharing that there's a younger demographic. Is that what your stats are showing in terms of who's buying these new RVs and or renting them?
I love seeing that because we did a survey of people who bought RVs for the first time in 2020, and then we did this again for people who bought RVs for the first time in 2021. So in 2020, the median age of a first-time RV buyer was 41. When we looked for 2021, that age had dropped to 33. So that seems really in line with what Amir had there at, I think it was around 36 was their average age that they're showing. And this really is a move towards a younger and more diverse RV owner. That demographic profile that I mentioned earlier with 11.2 million RV owners, the median age for all RV owners is 53. So the last 2 years, you've seen that age drop quite dramatically.
Yes, and there's this whole phenomenon in the RV space of these peer-to-peer platforms like RV Share and Outdoorsy. And that's sort of like Airbnb for RV and motorhome users. So obviously that's been growing the market, hasn't it? Because that provides a revenue stream to RV owners who can rent out their RV to, when they're not using it.
Yeah, what we asked in that same survey of people who had bought RVs for the first time last year, 46%, 41% are planning on listing their RV on a peer-to-peer rental site, because it is a way RVers use their RVs. There's no typical RVer, but if we do a typical RVer, it's about 21 days is how many days a year the RV is in use. And so that allows for a lot of additional days that can be used in this peer-to-peer rental market. And it's a great way to get people into the RV industry as well, because there are so many different types of RVs. There's motorized that you drive, there's the towable, and then within those two larger classes, there's a lot of different types. So taking that opportunity to rent through the peer-to-peer is really a great way for people to figure out what exactly works for them and their family.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's increased utilization. So more people are potentially out enjoying RVs than previously was possible. So we saw in the stats from Amir also this around 40% of RVers were saying business in general terms was part of it. And that speaks to this phenomenon of remote work. And so have you been seeing that in terms of your stats, the growth of people heading out on RV or motorhome trips, and then of course working remotely? And what are some of the sort of challenges and opportunities related to that remote work?
Yeah, so we have seen people who own RVs are taking more advantage of being able to, I hate this word, but like bleisure, that like new term of like the business and leisure travel. I feel like it's a weird word, but we have seen that definitely in the RV industry as well. And then when we surveyed leisure travelers, so not just RV travelers, but leisure travelers, to get that travel intention, and that's where we know 36% of leisure travelers are looking to take an RV trip in the next year, and 30% of those are considering working from or remote schooling from an RV in the next year. And we also asked how many had actually worked from an RV in the past year. And that was 20% of all leisure travelers had actually worked from an RV in the past year. So this is definitely a growing area. It's something RV manufacturers have taken notice of to build, make sure that part of the floor plans include those workstations. And the most important thing for a person who is traveling in an RV and trying to work, this is very obvious, is Wi-Fi. And the campgrounds that really get this and recognize this as a growing segment, treat Wi-Fi not as an amenity, but as a utility. It's the same as having water and sewer. You need to have that Wi-Fi. And it's those campgrounds and RV parks who really benefit from these people who are looking to work from the road.
Yeah, so we've talked about this before on our webinar series, the opportunity around the American Rescue Plan Act, the infrastructure bill. There's really unprecedented amounts of money that are available to help with rural broadband and other initiatives. And so certainly if you're a destination wanting to attract remote workers, talking to your campground owners, obviously there's opportunities in other rural areas, even national parks, state parks, thinking about coverage. And so you can then provide, compelling reasons. And we'll come back to this theme, I think, around electrification and the ability to be able to charge vehicles. So in the RV space, just on that point, Monica, what percentage of new builds currently are either being towed or are driving on a chassis with some sort of hybrid or electric? And at what speed is that migration to electric likely to happen in the coming years?
Yeah, so there's a lot of moving pieces in moving towards this electrified future. So 90% of all RVs are actually the towables. So travel trailers that you tow behind a tow vehicle. And some of those are very small teardrops that can be towed with a small, medium-sized SUV, and then obviously go all the way up to very large fifth wheels. That you need a larger tow vehicle for. And only 10% are actually the motorized. And that's going to be everything from your big bus size down to your Class B van campers. And so two of the largest RV manufacturers, both Thor Industries and Winnebago Industries, both have concept electric motorized RV concept vehicles, and those are not in production yet, but those were released earlier this year, and so we're moving towards that. But currently, there are a lot of people who use their electric vehicles as tow vehicles. I don't have the exact stat on how many people use that. We do have a stat from the Campgrounds of America that shows that 1 in 5 campers actually have an electric vehicle in their household, as opposed to 12% of the population at large. So these are people, campers, RVers, obviously care a lot about the environment, and move to electric vehicles is something that is important to them. And so getting that electric infrastructure is also really critical to the RV industry. It's not necessarily something someone thinks of right away, but it's really critical to our industry.
Yeah, and again, funding opportunities from both ARPA and the infrastructure bill, and a number of states such as Colorado, Oregon, and others have programs in place to either heavily subsidize or even pay for installs. So something, again, from a DMO perspective, to create the right infrastructure to attract these high value RV users. And just finally, Monica, what are the stats showing in terms of where are people heading? We saw some of the information from Longwoods, but what are your stats showing? What sorts of destinations are RV users heading out to?
Yeah, and it was similar to what Amir presented, but national parks. National parks are at the top of everyone's wish list, destination list in who are buying new RVs. That's usually bucket list things. But then once, and I think it was really interesting to see what Amir showed, because then once people kind of checked off those bucket lists, they settle into more of a, here's a campground that's 2, 3, 4 hours from my home that I really like, and I'm going to come back and visit there, or staying a little bit closer to home, is kind of the pattern that a lot of RVers settle into. But the reason to buy the RV, it's hitting up those national and state parks and exploring the great outdoors, is always top of the list.
Yeah, very good. And just a reminder to everybody, we did a deep dive into national parks as part of our Traveller Segments edition of the State of the American Traveller last September. So we'll be sure to include some of those links and some of the insights around national park users. So Monica, thanks so much for joining us. If you could stay on, and if we've got time at the end, we might come back for a few questions. I want to welcome in Kelly. And Kelly, the wonderful state of Michigan, has been doing road trips marketing for decades and decades. What's the latest in terms of what you're looking at in this space, in terms of both the Upper Peninsula, where you are, as well as the rest of the state?
Thanks, Chris, and hello and good afternoon, everyone. It's a little bit ironic, right? I took a road trip here this morning to Mackinac Island, where on Mackinac Island, cars are not allowed. So it's only by foot, bicycle, or horseback riding. So pretty interesting. So Michigan has been promoting road trips ever since Henry Ford himself took his Model T on a road trip to northern Michigan in the UP. Road trips are part of our DNA, like the automobile. So not surprising that road trips continue to be really an integral component of our campaign efforts today. So I'll share with you today some of our road trip initiatives from our website, campaign efforts, and travel guide. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't share a Pure Michigan road trip commercial to provide you with a little bit of insight as to what it's like to experience a Michigan road trip.
Along the way is where we find the unexpected. Along the way is where we take in the scenery, and often where we have the most fun. Sure, along the way can be the place we stop to fill up or grab a bite to eat. But in Michigan, along the way becomes the place we've been longing for. Because enjoying the journey is always pure Michigan. Your trip begins at michigan.org.
So we created that commercial a few years ago, and it still is part of our campaign efforts today, running today. So website. So we had a new release of a website in early May, and as everyone knows, websites do become dated quite quickly. So we worked with our partner at Miles to really create a unique experience. And we were really looking to find, from a usability standpoint, how we have so much content, and I know everyone out there has as well, on their websites, and how can we contain it? How can we make it usable? How can we make it well organized and thoughtful and meaningful? So working with the team, we really looked for inspiration from streaming channels. You know, everyone's been locked away right at home, ingesting so much Netflix and HBO Max that, you know, people were used to consuming that content in that way. So you'll see on michigan.org how we've categorized this content. And this is an example here of how we're representing our road trip content. It really gives, you know, the visitor a really good view of the itineraries and some of the partner listings that we have, as I'm sure you, as all of you do as well, have a lot of partner content that you need to support. So we really wanted to think outside the box when it comes to the reorganization of the website. And I must say also, you know, we also have accessibility in mind when it comes to all of this. We work really hard to make certain that, you know, individuals with an accessibility need, we are able to provide that content to them as well. So this just gives you a little bit of, closer look. If I think I went too far. Closer look at that content. So we've identified our specific road trip content as road trip, as you can see the category there, but really just, you know, how we've outlined it and how we've showcased with some great photography, but also how we've organized that content so to help people plan their road trip in Michigan. So itineraries as well, we have a special section there. Just once you come from the hub, you go a little bit deeper down into the itineraries and really providing suggested routes. And, you know, we all have the content for specific destinations, but we really wanted to expand it to provide more of a regional approach. So if I'm going to spend some time in the Detroit area, here's all this other, you know, experiences that I can see and do while I'm in Michigan. This is just an example of one blog itinerary content that we have for Chequamenon Falls, 15 stops on a road trip along the Chequamenon Byway. So again, providing that level of inspiration for the traveler, but also letting them know about some other experiences they may not be aware of. Things to do in Traverse City, the ultimate pure Michigan guide. And then here's one of those examples too, that we do 6 stops for a 1-tank road trip in Southeast Michigan. So really focusing on those, you know, with the expense of gas, trying to again inspire travelers that, you know, hey, on 1 tank, you can go to all these 6 different opportunities in Michigan. And really, I should have said earlier too, we are targeting our, on the campaign, our key regional markets. And so when they come to michigan.org, they get exposed to these opportunities when it comes to a trip idea. And then this is something a little bit different that we tried. You know, everyone I think is well, familiar in Michigan with Traverse City, Mackinac Island, Detroit, Grand Rapids. So we wanted to create these pocket guides that we thought would be a great opportunity to showcase those hidden gems in Michigan and provide a little bit of deeper dive. And we actually make them printable so people can print these from the website and just give them a little bit of insight about if they want to go to Bel Air, which is up in northern Michigan by Torch Lake, and all the things again that they can see and do and experience. And city, as I'm, travel websites get, with all the different destinations that we need to promote and how we can, again, organize this content. So this just illustrates how, from a regional perspective, we put the map and people can select what region they want to go to. They can actually search cities by name if they're familiar that way. Or again, they can go back to the regional approach as well to help them define what they want to do on their vacation. Okay, so campaign efforts. So from the road trips perspective, we do sprinkle it in throughout the campaign. I showed you the TV ad. This is a partnership that we have with Coca-Cola. This is an in-state promotion. We are working on them to try to go out of state, but it's in-state at this point. So this summer, when people are on a road trip, travelers are on a road trip throughout the state of Michigan, they can visit the Blarney Castle gas stations and convenience stores. So when they stop in there, they're going to see a whole bunch of Pure Michigan and Coca-Cola win a Pure Michigan road trip promotion. So it'll be at the pumps, it'll be throughout the store for point of sale. And this will run from June 2nd through the end of August at 144 gas stations across the state to promote winning a trip to Mackinac Island. So another extension of that on the left there is a vending machine cover. So throughout the state at some key tourist destinations, there will also be Pure Michigan wrapped vending machine covers with Coca-Cola. Another thing that we try to do annually is really create a Pure Michigan road trip playlist with our streaming radio audio opportunities. This one happens to be with Pandora. Typically, we try to curate with the partner Michigan specific artist. This year, it's with Motown and celebrating Detroit and the Motown music. So we have an active campaign, Let the Motown Station Drive Your Summer Road Trip. And when people click that, they go right to the Motown station to have that experience. And just a great, again, road trip opportunity to support that for the state, but also people, curate these lists within their Pandora channels. So it gives another reminder of Pure Michigan throughout the year. Travel guides, huge integration. We have fall road trips that we're looking forward for the fall winter Pure Michigan travel guide with Meredith Publishing. And we are showcasing a number of destinations and what you can do for those fall road trips. And then a PR opportunity that we're working on in Forward Thinking for Memorial Holiday, which is right around the corner. This one is with Ohio News Network with our friends in Ohio. So it's one tank trip, hit the road without breaking the bank. And it showcases destinations like Ann Arbor, Detroit, and Great Lakes Bay, and really to inspire individuals, travelers to come to Michigan over the Memorial Holiday and how it could really be a cost-effective opportunity for them just to get away. And then the future of road trips, right? Everything's changing quickly, and there's all the concerns that are valid with range anxiety and individuals taking their EV electric vehicle to a road trip, and how can they accomplish that? So there's a lot that's been going on in Michigan lately. We just had a recent partnership with the National Park Service to advance accessibility, affordability, and mobility within the state's national parks. We have 6 of them in the state. It's a first of a kind partnership that really tries to improve safety, sustainability, and equitable access to national parks through innovative mobility technologies deployed in those national parks. So we're really excited about that partnership rolling out. This last week, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources announced that 30 charging stations will be installed in parks along the Lake Michigan shoreline. So it will make a trek all along the Lake Michigan shoreline to help, again, that range anxiety that's out there. So those charging stations will be started beginning in June throughout the summer, and it'll be throughout the Upper Peninsula in the next year. So a lot of great opportunities when it comes to the EV opportunities in Michigan as well, really forward-looking for the state. So thank you. That's my update today on what we're doing with road trips in Cheer, Michigan.
Thank you so much, Kelly. You've been very busy and wonderful client to work with, and a real wonderful range and, of course, history in terms of road trips in Michigan. So I'll just ask everybody, if you've got any questions, drop them in the Q&A tab for any of the speakers, Amir, Kelly, or Monica. We'll come to those in the final few minutes. Just a reminder that the slide decks from today, plus the additional research slides from Longwoods International, are going to be shared on the road trip site, plus those stats that I mentioned from the RV Industry Association. And they've got some wonderful infographics and segmentation data around RV users. Just a quick question, Monica. Before I come to Q&A, just a reminder, we are running currently a large global study called Time for Democracy. It's looking at how DMOs can build successful, resilient, and enduring partnerships with their local communities and businesses. In the next week or so, we'll be sending out a survey on what you're doing in this space, what sort of investments you're making around connecting with local residents, community groups, etc., and building a dialogue on how tourism develops in your community to ensure that you've got broad support. And we're going to ask specifically about issues around, for example, short-term rentals, housing, workforce issues, how tourism is seen as a job opportunity in your community, etc. So we'd really appreciate your response to that survey. Everybody who responds will get a summary of the results. And we also thank our partners at Destinations International and our European partners who are working with us on this. So let's come to our questions. Monica, have you ever worked with a DMO, a destination marketing organization, say a state, do you have any examples to share, or how would a state tourism organization or other tourism organization potentially collaborate with the industry association?
So we definitely have. I have to admit that I am I've been in this role for about 1.5 years. And I know that the team has worked with DMOs in the past, but I unfortunately don't have those exact examples to share with you, but we definitely have.
Yeah, so you mentioned your consumer marketing campaign, which I think is Go RVing. And obviously there's a consumer facing site, etc. So what's the sort of size and scale of that consumer facing marketing and advertising campaign? Can you give us any sense of its breadth?
Yeah, so we try to reach as many people as possible. We've got our website that has first timer toolkits, and we have a lot of inspiration and road trips and just everything someone needs to get started going RVing, and direct them to campgrounds and dealers and rental. Everything you possibly could need is what you're going to find on the Go RVing website.
Very good. Yeah, so perhaps there might be opportunities for DMOs to collaborate, and we'll be sharing Monica's information afterwards. But let me just come to another question. In terms of international travel, Amir, so obviously the war in Ukraine, rising airline fuel prices is impacting airline ticket prices. There's also the hassle if you travel overseas of having to get tested within 24 hours when you come back to the United States. So what are you seeing in terms of concerns around international travel, and is there a continuing sort of substitution to domestic travel going on?
Great question, Chris. Yeah, there is that it started during the pandemic. It continues for all those factors, but predominantly it's the perceived hassle of traveling because the rules from travel from country to country continue to change and evolve, and sometimes by the week or the day in there, and testing requirements or non-testing requirements, and documentation and so forth. So we're still seeing that of those travelers who are changing their plans, their travel plans in the next 6 months, 25% or 26% to be exact, say that they are opting for a domestic trip instead of an international trip. So great opportunity for U.S. destinations to really capitalize on this. And for those involved in the international market, there's opportunity to work with your policymakers to review and perhaps update the policies to make sure that they're travel friendly while still keeping travelers safe.
Yeah. In fact, there was a big article on the testing requirements in New York Times over the weekend, and the pressure I know US Travel and others have been putting on regarding dropping testing procedures, as many countries have been. Kelly, I just wanted to come to the issue of in-state travel. Obviously, with gas prices, people are going to be looking at traveling closer to home. So is it part of the mandate of Pure Michigan to market in-state? And if so, is that an extensive part or a growing part of what you're going to be doing over the summer and beyond?
Yeah, so as far as our reach, we're only 20% of our marketing campaign is reaching in-state travelers. The 80% is outside of the state. So this summer, we're also connecting with the regional markets that are right around the state of Michigan. We're also reaching out a little bit further this year, even to Atlanta and Louisville. So while we do target in-state, it is a very low percentage.
Very good. And I know some states are mandated to only market out of state, but arguably both for the reasons of wanting to ensure that people, substitute, if they're going to be substituting travel, potentially they're substituting travel out of state to in-state travel, which creates obviously new opportunities, and also just connecting and staying in touch with your local residents can be hugely important. Just in terms of charging stations, do you know, Kelly, were you accessing funding from any of those sources that Monica and I were flagging in terms of the infrastructure bill or ARPA?
This is actually the EV charging stations in the state park is really being supported by the automotive industry. So this is not part of the ARPA funding. The automotive industry wanted to take part in this and to provide these opportunities throughout Michigan.
There you go. So another example of a great partnership. And just a reminder to everybody that there was, as part of ARPA, $350 billion with a B dollars going out to every state, city, and county. And some work that Brookings Institute done. The second tranche of that, the 50% just came out or is coming out in the last few months. Brookings Institute's estimated that over half of that second tranche has not been allocated. So there's literally billions of dollars of government support that potentially could be targeting, whether it's expanding the rollout of electric charging stations or dealing with rural broadband and getting Wi-Fi into state parks, national park, and other locations. So significant opportunities there to work with your state, local, and city government partners in terms of accessing that funding. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up slightly early. Our thanks again to our speakers and panelists today, Amir, Kelly, and Monica. Thank you so much for joining us and for the information you've shared, and to everybody who's joined us today, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be in touch with the resources from today. And we look forward to a great summer drive season, tackling some of the challenges, and we look forward to seeing you at an upcoming event, hopefully in person soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.